What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. I remember not too long ago seeing an announcement for a card called Summon Dice, and it was actually released in Battles of Legend Relentless Revenge. And as I was reading this card, I thought to myself, for a luck-based card, this is actually pretty good. I mean, yeah, it's a neg 1, 2 out of 3 times, but it's bestowing you with an ability that's actually rather powerful. I mean, getting an extra normal summon, special summoning a level 5 or higher monster out of your hand, or as a 1-for-1, you get to special summon something out of the graveyard. So those are 3 pretty good effects, and it had me thinking about luck-based cards and their role in the game, but especially in competitive Yu-Gi-Oh!, and that's what I wanted to go ahead and discuss today. But before we get into it, I want to give a big shout out to my newest YouTube channel members as always. So big shout outs today to Ermac792. You are the reason that this channel is growing strong. And if you guys want to help support me in the channel through a YouTube channel membership, get your little Cimo badge down in the comments, then be sure to hit the join button down below or check out the links in the description. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. So historically, when it comes to luck-based cards, let's be honest, they all really fucking suck. I mean, the luck-based cards we've seen in this game have just been utterly terrible because usually you need to have some just extreme, insane just amount of luck to get anything good out of these specific cards. One instance of this is something like Barrel Dragon. Now, let me be honest, I love Barrel Dragon just because of the role that it has in the anime. The artwork is badass, but frankly, Barrel Dragon is utterly terrible. I mean, you need 2 tributes to be able to summon this thing in the first place. Its effect is only once per turn, and you have to get 2 out of 3 coin flips resulting in heads to be able to destroy a monster on the field. That means you only have a 50% chance of that effect going off. And this is just one example. I mean, Barrel Dragon might be a good one compared to some of the other ones, but I just wanted to kind of use this as an example here. But there have been some instances where luck-based cards were not only powerful, but also played a very vital role in their specific metagames. I'm going to start by going way back to a time where a lot of you guys might not have even played the game, to a card known as Snipe Hunter. Snipe Hunter is one of my favorite cards of all time. And when you compare it to something like Barrel Dragon, there's a lot of reasons why Snipe Hunter is an example of a good luck-based card. First off, it's level 4, so you can just normal summon it. You don't have to waste 2 of your resources in order to get it onto the field. Second, its effect isn't once per turn, so even if you don't get the effect the first time, you can use the effect again and try again. Or, let's say you have 5 cards in your hand, because the third thing is that it discards cards in order to activate its effect. If you have 5 cards in your hand, you could potentially pop 5 of your opponent's cards on their field with a single card, and back then, that was absolutely unheard of. Now, the discard effect is actually very important because since this was cost and it wasn't a once per turn effect, you could empty out your whole hand, and there were so many combos to be had with Snipe Hunter. I mean, this is a time where Destiny Hero Malicious was being played, so pitch a Malicious, special summon another one. You could also do stuff like pitch a monster to resurrect it with a card like Premature Burial. So there's a lot of really cool things you could do with Snipe Hunter, but I think the biggest factor as to why Snipe Hunter was so powerful, the probability of resolving its effect was actually pretty good. I mean, you basically rolled a 6-sided die, and as long as it didn't result in a 1 or a 6, you popped the selected card. Now, this is good because that means you have a 66-67% chance of that effect resolving, and in most instances, people would pull that off. And for the opportunity to pop 2, 3, even 4 cards, people were more than willing to play Snipe Hunter. So much so, it actually got a Champion Pack Super Rare printing from its former common printing, and I believe, was it Cyber Dark Impact, actually? I'm not too sure about that, but it was only a common when it was first released. Another example of, let's say, good luck-based cards was Blind Obliteration. Now, this is a card that saw play towards the latter end of the Zodiac format, but it was actually pretty cool. Essentially, you roll 2 6-sided dice, and you destroy all monsters on the field whose levels were lower than the combined total roll. So if you rolled a 10, it destroyed everything on the field that was level 9 or rank 9 or lower. It's levels and ranks. That was very important. So one of the interesting things about Blind Obliteration is that, if I recall correctly, Torrential Tribute was still only at 1, and since board wipes were so crucial during the Zodiac format because there wasn't really a way to kind of play around them other than playing specific cards to counter them, and it's kind of a good way to reset the field, players were willing to play copies of Blind Obliteration to effectively have a second, third, and fourth copy of Torrential Tribute in their deck. And even though it didn't work all the time, it was still worth it to have that sort of power at their disposal. But there was also another advantage to Blind Obliteration, and it's the fact that it actually played around specific cards that were played in that format. My Body as a Shield was one of the most played cards at the time because to use it to protect from board wipes or to destroy opposing Dryadents or a myriad of different things, and it actually couldn't stop Blind Obliteration. It was ruled that since Blind Obliteration has an element of luck and could actually destroy nothing, My Body as a Shield couldn't be used in response to Blind Obliteration's effect. Now, I'm not sure if that ruling got, appealed or upended or whatever, but there was a time where you could not use that in response, and that was actually very, very vital because since it was such a played card, you could use it to outplay My Body as a Shield and completely wipe the board. And then one of the most extreme instances of a luck-based card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is Sixth Sense. And let's be honest, this card was broken as fuck. Like, this card should have never been legal because aside from it being a trap card, it was literally all upside. You rolled a die, you pretty much called 5 or 6 every single time, and if you called it correctly, you drew that many cards, and if you didn't, you milled that many cards. So if you call 5 or 6, oh, guess what? You just got an entire new hand for literally nothing, and if you called it wrong, you're gonna mill stuff to the graveyard. And there's plenty of decks that rely on getting cards in the graveyard, so it's not like that was a bad thing. This was around when Dragon Rulers were a thing, just keep that in mind. And even if you played a deck that didn't care about the graveyard, you were still gonna play Sixth Sense because the option to just draw 5 or 6 cards off of it is too good not to play. That's literally a game-breaking and winning effect if it resolves. So I think Sixth Sense is kind of the complete opposite end of the spectrum where we have all these really bad luck-based cards, but then there's just, this card is just should never have been made and it's way too good. So I'm talking about that middle ground when it comes to luck-based cards. And what's interesting is that we've had an archetype that actually does have an element of luck involved, and that archetype is SPYRAL. Now, I don't like to say SPYRAL is a completely luck-based archetype. I like to call it controlled luck. And what do I mean by that? Well, all the SPYRAL cards have the ability where you're calling the top card of your opponent's deck, monster, spell, or trap, in order to trigger some sort of effect. And in theory, since there's 3 card types, you have a 33% chance to call correctly, right? Well, that's not necessarily the case, because players aren't really going to be playing that many trap cards, especially at the competitive level. Monsters and spells are much more abundant. So right there, you can kind of just rule out, if you don't know what your opponent's playing, to call either monster or spell, because trap is most likely not going to be the card. In addition to that, if you do know what they're playing, then it changes everything, because let's say you're going up against a Pendulum player. Well, since Pendulum monsters are treated as spells while they're in the deck, Pendulum decks are completely comprised of Pendulum monsters and spell cards, which means you have about an 80 to 90% chance of it being a spell card on top of their deck. And same thing goes if you're playing against Paleozoic or Altergeist, of it being a trap card, so on and so forth. But then you also have cards that are built into the archetype, like Spiral Drone, which allow you to see the top card of your opponent's deck so that you're calling that card correctly 100% of the time. Again, assuming nothing gets disrupted. So it's luck, but there's also this element where you can control the luck and manipulate it into your favor. But you kind of have to think about, if Spiral didn't have that element to it, think about how broken the cards would be if not. I mean, Spiral Tough would just say target a card on the field and destroy it. Might be one of the strongest cards ever printed in the entire game. Spiral Double Helix would just say special summon a Spiral monster from the deck. Like, that would be ridiculous. So it's interesting that luck actually plays a balancing role for this archetype. And yeah, sure, there's going to be instances where players aren't going to call it correctly, but there are going to be the ones that they do, and it's completely blind luck. And that's where it kind of comes down to, is luck luck good for the game in that sense? Is there enough variance there that people are okay with that being acceptable? Because I look back at cards like Blind Obliteration and like Snipe Hunter, and I feel like that these cards were really good because they did something really powerful, or they offered something that wasn't necessarily available at the time in exchange for an element of luck. And I kind of think about if they kept kind of going with that theme, how far they could really take it. So like, for instance, would you play a second, third, and fourth copy of Monster Reborn if you had, let's say, a 66% chance for it to resolve? I think a lot of people would actually consider it, or even going further than that, look at Soul Charge. Like, if you had a 66% chance to resolve a Soul Charge, would you run 3 extra copies of it? Hell yeah, I think a lot of people would, and it would create this really interesting power dynamic that, yes, your deck is less consistent because you're playing a card that doesn't necessarily allow you to pull off what you want to do every single time, but your deck is going to have a much higher ceiling because if those effects do resolve, then you're going to be in a much better situation and you're going to win a lot more games. And it really comes down to if that level of variance is something people are willing to tolerate. Because yes, while some people could say like going up against SPYRAL or going up against any luck-based card, oh, it went down to luck, you know, he called the top card correctly, he rolled with Blind Obliteration, or whatever the instance is, the player could attribute their loss to that specific instance. Or you could look at it the other way, that the player who incorporated that luck-based card into their deck actually had to make the conscious decision that this card is good enough for me to run, that I can justify the fact that it's not going to resolve a majority of the time. It's really interesting and fascinating the more you think about it and how cards like this might work. Now, I think too much of this is probably a bad thing, but it's kind of interesting to think that if there were a couple cards incorporated that had a high enough power level that weren't too broken, but had that element of luck incorporated into them, to really see what people would do with them. And I don't know what those cards would be, but I think if we've seen examples like Snipe Hunter and Blind Obliteration actually being competitively viable, I think those are instances of, you know, cards that have luck are actually good and good enough realistically to see play, and people have to make that decision in their head that if they want to run extra copies of a card that has a similar effect, are they willing to trade off the consistency for it? But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about good luck-based cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Do you think they have a role in the game? Do you think that they have no place in the game? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. So guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always. Subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. And if you found this video informative, consider becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support for the channel, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.